start, or I can. All right. That sounds like my cue to start.
Yeah, you saw a thing, I think. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to introduce myself and my co-presenter and colleague. My name is Fega Brisman Taylor. I'm a Senior Associate Director at the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And Melanie, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
I'm Associate Director at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and looking forward to being here with all of you today.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, can everyone see myself, Melanie, on the screen?
You see them do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I always like to start this presentation with a quote from our founder, Michael J. Fox, who was diagnosed at the age of 29. He says, "Our challenges don't define us, our actions do." And I'd like to say that everyone who came and took time out of their afternoon today is doing a positive action. You are an active member of the Parkinson's community. We are so glad to be here with you today and share as much as we can. We also hope to impart a feeling of hope. So once you learn about all of the wonderful work and the big community of people and our foundation behind you, I hope you'll continue to take these positive actions. And I'm going to pass it over to Melanie to start talking a little bit more about our foundation.
Well, it's so nice to be here with this group today. And I always like to just start off by giving a little bit more high level info about what the Michael J. Fox Foundation is, what our mission is, and sort of how we get there. So as some of you may know, the Michael J. Fox Foundation is fully dedicated to finding a cure for Parkinson's disease. And we do that through an aggressively funded research agenda. And as well as finding a cure, we also want to find and support the development of improved therapies for people currently living with Parkinson's. So just to give you a little sense of how this all came to be and what that has looked like over the past 24 years, we were founded in the year 2000 by, of course, actor Michael J. Fox, shortly after he went public with his own Parkinson's diagnosis. And he partnered with our current CEO, Deborah Burks, to really create a foundation with a vision to bring together business acumen, scientific excellence, and the really important perspectives of people living with Parkinson's and their care partners to really be able to push research forward in a way that hadn't been done before. And we have seen such success in that, which I'll dive into a little bit more in a minute. But since our founding in 2000, we have funded over $2 billion in Parkinson's research programs to date. And that makes us the largest single funder of Parkinson's research in the world, larger than any single government. So it's really, we've really provided this influx of important investment to the research field. But beyond that, we've also really created a partnership among the field of scientific research in Parkinson's and brain disease in general. So what that looks like is that we funded over 3,200 different projects led by academics, biotech companies, pharma companies, all of that. And on average, about 40% of those projects are led outside of the US. One thing that we know about Parkinson's is that it does not discriminate. And so we want to make sure that we're as inclusive as possible throughout the entire process of deciding which research to fund through, including people of all different types from across the world throughout that research process, so that when we find a cure, we know it's a cure that can treat everyone with Parkinson's. So that's really important to us. And we're proud to say that on average, since inception, about 88 cents on every dollar goes directly to research from the foundation. And we have on average about more than 100,000 individual donors who support us every year. So we've really grown to be this incredible network of support for Parkinson's research. So I wanted to talk next a little bit about our vision. So as I said, our goal is to cure Parkinson's, and we envision a world without Parkinson's disease. And to achieve that goal, we're really focusing on funding research for better symptomatic and disease-modifying treatments. We're looking to improve the clinical trial process to reach results faster and more effectively. And we're also advocating for policies and regulations that remove environmental and social contributors that could lead to developing Parkinson's disease. So we kind of have these three, key objectives that are all working hand in hand to achieve our vision. And actually at the Fox Foundation, we have a team of internal PhDs who review every single proposal we receive, and it's usually thousands a year. And they also collaborate across the industry to align science and make sure we're choosing the projects that have the best potential or the most novelty in terms of discovery to make sure that we're looking at Parkinson's from all angles. The last thing I wanted to say here is we really value open science. And what we mean by that is that every single project that is funded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation is required to share the results publicly. So that means a scientist could be working on, for example, mitochondrial function and how that affects Parkinson's in Kentucky. And there's another scientist in France working on something similar. If they're both being funded by us, they'll be able to see each other's work. We might even be able to connect them and, brain power coming together, putting their ideas together. Sometimes that can lead to really great results faster. Okay, so I talked a little bit about clinical trial, drug development. Not everyone knows what that process looks like. So I just wanted to take a minute to kind of give you an overview of what we mean by getting a therapy into the hands of patients. So this graphic kind of helps to indicate how an idea goes through the process to become a treatment that is in the hands of patients. And this is true actually for almost any therapeutic, not just for Parkinson's disease. But basically, you start with this discovery. A scientist somewhere has this idea. Then they have to validate that idea, that target in a laboratory setting. Once they do that, you can move on to putting together clinical trials. Clinical trials consist of 3 phases. The first phase is the very first step in testing a potential therapeutic in humans. This is a very, very small number of people in this early trial. It's just to see if this drug is tolerated well and how the body processes it. If that's deemed safe enough, then we go into a phase 2 trial where you test for effectiveness for targeting the specific disease you're looking to fix. And this is a slightly larger trial, still pretty small though. And once we see results in the phase 2 trial, we'll move into a phase 3 large scale study that's really testing for both effectiveness and efficacy of a specific treatment. And it's also trying to understand what the side effects might be. And these phase 3 trials are much bigger, they take a little bit longer, and we're really looking to include a broader, more diverse population to understand how the drug will affect all different types of people. So then once you go through all 3 phases of a clinical trial, if your drug makes it that far, then you have to submit for regulatory approval. In the US, that would be through the FDA. So this pipeline, it's a long process and it can be very, very expensive. And early on, the Michael J. Fox Foundation looked at this process and we identified this orange region that you see in the middle of the graphic for that early target validation through sort of phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials as the time when most therapeutics or most ideas tend to fizzle out. That might be due to lack of investment or lack of good data or a bad research structure. So that's where we choose to step in. We choose to generally fund projects in this orange area that will, with the goal of de-risking promising research enough. So putting that infrastructure behind it, putting that investment behind promising ideas to get it to this stage where our deeper pocketed partners, so that would be companies like biotechs, pharmaceuticals, venture capitalists who have a lot more money than we do, can fund those really expensive phase 3 trials through regulatory approval. So this process is really important. That's where we choose to focus. And we've actually seen some great results. So right now, today, there are 41 treatments approved for the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, we do not yet have a disease modifying therapy. That is something we are working on. But it is important to have these treatments for people living with Parkinson's today to help treat those symptoms so they can live a better life. And since the foundation came to be in 2000, we have seen 29 of those 41 therapies approved. And also the timeline, that big long timeline I talked about, can take, it used to take more than 25 years to complete. And now with our support, usually that timeline is cut in half. So we're seeing that this mentality, this model we've been using, is really having a strong effect. So we're really, really pleased to kind of be taking this role in the industry. And I think this is a great moment. First, I'll pause to see if anyone has questions about the clinical trial development pipeline, all of that. Otherwise, I'll pass it off to Fega to share a little bit more about what's happening in the research landscape today. Any questions?
Okay, we also will have some time for questions at the end. So if anybody thinks of anything, don't worry, you have plenty of opportunities. Feel free to utilize that chat. Melanie can interrupt me if you don't want to do it. But I'm happy to dive into the research update and build a little bit more on what Melanie has been talking about. So what I'd like to start off with is talking about a cure. Now, this is a conversation I have with a lot of people, and honestly, it's something a lot of people ask me as well. When we talk about a world without Parkinson's, what do we mean? Sometimes I'll speak to people and they might say, if you put a pause button on my symptoms and I knew I wouldn't progress anymore, like I'd take that. That's a cure to me. Some people will say to me, actually, I want you to dial back the clock from before I had symptoms. That's what a cure would be like. Some people will say, well, I'm willing to take a pill for the rest of my life as long as I feel fine. Some people are like, no, I want to forget this ever happened to me. So we really get a myriad of responses. And what we're thinking about at the foundation, also really runs the gamut. So I just want to walk through when we talk about a cure or something that will change the face of the disease, what we're talking about. When we look at someone who's in the earlier stage of their Parkinson's diagnosis, often what we are looking to do is to stop or slow down their progression, to, buy people a little bit more time in those early stages. When we're looking to people who've been living with Parkinson's for a few years, often what we're trying to do is replace or restore some of the losses that they've seen in their own life with their own function due to the onset of Parkinson's. But really, what we're actually trying to do is look ahead to the future, and we're trying to identify Parkinson's before it's been diagnosed, and we're trying to intervene so that symptoms don't even start. And so when we think in terms of longevity, we certainly have people living with Parkinson's in mind today, but ultimately, we're looking for a way to intervene before we even get to that diagnosis. So how are we exploring some of these ways to change the face of the disease or to slow or to stop progression? We have a number of different research areas that we find really compelling right now. So I thought I'd share a few with you. The first one is something called alpha-synuclein. I see a couple of you on my screen. Has anybody heard this phrase before? Yeah, it doesn't. Okay, so it doesn't seem super familiar. I know all of you, if you have Parkinson's or know people with Parkinson's, you know about dopamine. So one of the hallmarks or the hallmark of Parkinson's is the fact that dopamine is depleted or dopamine's just not working the way that it used to or the way that it does in people who don't have Parkinson's disease. So at the foundation, we took a step back. We tried to figure out what's happening to the dopamine. Why isn't it working the same way it does in their general population for people with Parkinson's disease? And we were able to identify a culprit. The culprit was this protein, whose name is alpha-synuclein. And what happens, it's a protein that everyone has, but in people with Parkinson's, it seems to be acting a little bit differently. It misfolds, it aggregates on itself and causes these clumps, which we believe in turn creates a toxic environment for dopamine, which is why your dopamine's not thriving, and that will lead to the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Our hope is by really cleaning out the environment for dopamine, by disaggregating these aggregations, we can stop the harm that's been caused to dopamine. Perhaps we can even replace the dopamine so gains can be made where there were losses before. Currently, we have 13 clinical trials that are happening right now in phase 1 and phase 2. And these 13 trials aren't all attacking the alpha-synuclein in one way. There are different approaches that we look at the same thing, which is really heartening. It's really exciting. We have 13 different ways of perhaps fixing this problem and creating an environment in the brain for dopamine to flourish. In addition to that, we're looking at genetic targets. And often people will ask me why we look to these genetic targets, because most people with Parkinson's disease do not have a known genetic mutation, I should say. Only about 10 to 15% of people who are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease have a known genetic link to their onset. Most people have what we call idiopathic, which means we're just not sure why they have Parkinson's disease. So we have a big concentration on actually studying these genetic mutations because we believe that even though the general population of people with Parkinson's don't have a link, studying those links can be beneficial to everyone, to the entire population of people with Parkinson's. And I like to just give an example of how that could be. So we just learned a little bit about alpha-synuclein. Well, how did we discover it in the first place? It was kind of discovered, maybe not quite by accident, but sort of like a happy occurrence. There was one family in Italy where there was a phenomenon that we hadn't seen anywhere else, but everyone in that family would seem to get Parkinson's at some time in their life. We were able to study their genetics, and we saw that they had a genetic mutation on their synuclein gene. So that really gave us a clue. There might be something going on with synuclein. Well, not only did it give us a clue about that family, but we found that most people with Parkinson's had synuclein that wasn't acting the way it does in the general population. So by studying these genetic mutations, sometimes it can provide us with a little bit of a shortcut to how we might rectify a problem. So it's really just sort of like looking at a recipe and being able to identify where something went wrong and being able to bake that cake again. In addition to those two areas, we can have up to like 800 grants that we fund at any given time. So we're always looking at underlying biology, cellular processes. Maybe there's something wrong with the cell function, which is why this protein isn't able to pass through the way that it does in the general population. A lot of you may have seen inflammation in the headlines. That's where there's a swelling or there's toxic byproducts. And that's something that we look at as well. So we're looking at the mitochondria, lysosomal functions, oxidative stress, and cell repair. And all of these we're hoping will give us a clue as to how we might be able to rectify the underlying biology of Parkinson's. What we found when we were looking at all of these priority areas and areas of research is that we would occasionally encounter some roadblocks, and we'd have to look at, well, why aren't we able to solve this problem? What are some field-wide challenges that we can really address to get us a cure more quickly? And one thing that we found that I think a lot of you will identify with is the fact that there was no one standard for diagnosis. Everyone I speak to, or a lot of people I speak to, tell me that they have a diagnosis story. They were misdiagnosed. They were sent to this doctor or that doctor. And the truth is, there was no one conclusive test that people could take that could say, yes, you have Parkinson's. No, you don't have Parkinson's. That's something that we like to call a biomarker or a diagnostic tool. It can be something like testing your blood sugar to see if you have diabetes, or it could be something like taking an x-ray to see if you have a broken bone. There was no sort of yes or no diagnostic tool for Parkinson's. And I was speaking to a community member, and he said something that really resonated with me. He was talking about his diagnosis, and he said, I went to a doctor, and he had me walking up and down a hallway, and he had me going like this with my fingers. And then he gave me this diagnosis that changed my life. And he's like, it was so unscientific. Like, how do you tell me my whole life has changed when you just saw me walking up and down a hall? And, you know, it really resonated with me because he just felt like it was so unscientific. But that's how we diagnose Parkinson's. You go to a neurologist who hopefully has a specialty in movement disorders, and they're experienced enough to look at your movement and give you the diagnosis. Well, we felt like this was not enough. So in 2010, the Michael J. Fox Foundation launched a longitudinal study, which is like a clinical trial that we administer, where we just observe people and collect their data. It's called the Parkinson's Progressions Markers Initiative, or PPMI for short. So we gathered a large group of people with Parkinson's and without Parkinson's, and we took every bit of data that we could think of from them. We will administer tests. We will look at their movements. We take tissue samples. And this is all in the hopes of leading to insights and tools that can help us with diagnosis. Now, Melanie was speaking a bit about like our open science. All of the information that we gathered from this study went into a giant repository that is readily available to everyone. And researchers are using it. You can use it if you want to, just ask us how. But it got over 2,500 downloads a day. The last time I checked, there were over 14 million downloads, period. So we know that there was a need for this kind of data. And there could be researchers all over the world who are currently working on a cure that could really use this data. So we knew that this was a challenge that we could really address in the Parkinson's landscape. As we were doing it, we realized it's not enough. And in 2020, we decided to expand. So we shot high, and we were trying to double the participants. And that's something that we're still trying to do. So we've grown to over 50 sites internationally, whereas we previously had 1,400 participants. We now are aiming for 4,000 participants. We're almost, we're a little over halfway there, but we could always use more participation. Again, if you participate in this clinical trial, you don't receive a therapeutic, you're not being tested for any drugs, but we just simply watch you to see what we can learn about Parkinson's disease. In addition to being involved in this in a clinical setting, we also have an online version of PPMI, and that's open to anyone who wants to participate who's over the age of 18 and lives in the United States. But for our in-person components, we are now recruiting. We're looking for people who've been diagnosed within the past 2 years, people who exhibit risk factors for Parkinson's, and risk factors include some of the genetics that we discussed before. Risk factors can include loss of smell, people with REM sleep behavior disorder, if you have a first-degree relative with Parkinson's disease, and we're also looking for control volunteers, people with no connection to Parkinson's that they know of at all. So if you look at the bottom of this screen, you will see the web address, you'll see a phone number you can call to see if you qualify to participate in person. We're all in the New York area, and we're very blessed to have wonderful state-of-the-art medical centers here. There are 3 PPMI sites in New York. I believe that they are NYU, Columbia, and Mount Sinai. So if you fit this criteria and can participate, we would definitely encourage you to participate. If you don't, please still participate in the online version of PPMI. This was, when we started this, it was big, it was bold. We wanted to find a diagnostic. And I am incredibly happy to announce, and you may have seen this in the headlines also, it was just announced just about a year ago this month, we actually found a biomarker. And still, when I talk about this, I get a little emotional because I have been working with people who've been working on this day in and day out for over 20 years. So it's an incredible discovery. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about it. We're going to keep looping back to that alpha-synuclein. That actually is where we found the biomarker. We knew alpha-synuclein was present in people with Parkinson's only because we were able to see it in autopsy tissue. We'd never been able to see it in a living brain until PPMI came along. So through some of the tissues that we had collected through PPMI, we were able to institute something where we were actually taking a page out of the Alzheimer's book. We were copying them a little bit. But we found something that we are now calling the alpha-synuclein seeding assay, or amplification seeding assay. I might call it SAA for short. And what that does is we were able to collect alpha-synuclein samples from cerebral spinal fluid of PPMI participants. So it's a bit of an invasive way to collect this tissue sample. It's done through a spinal tap, which I'm sure is very uncomfortable, but we're definitely working to make it a bit more palatable for people. And what we did is we mixed the Parkinson's alpha-synuclein with synthetic alpha-synuclein that did not have these clumps in it. Once we mixed them together, we were able to observe whether or not clumps grew in that synthetic form of the alpha-synuclein. If it did, we knew that whoever's alpha-synuclein we had mixed with it would have a positive Parkinson's diagnosis. So if the clumps formed, that meant that person had Parkinson's. If the clumps did not form, that would be a negative Parkinson's diagnosis, or you do not have Parkinson's. So this was a huge breakthrough. We were able to synthesize it in the lab, and we were able to really be able to diagnose people with Parkinson's in a yes or no setting with a tool for the first time. As we talk about this breakthrough, we are already putting it into action. Right now, this SAA is being used in clinical trials, and it's helpful in so many ways. But one of the main ways it's helpful is, we discuss diagnosis, and for many people, they could have something that looks like Parkinson's. So now we have this diagnostic tool. We can make sure that people in clinical trials actually have Parkinson's disease. That's crucial because we could have a therapeutic that's in clinical trials, and if it's being tested on people who don't have Parkinson's and doesn't work, and then it doesn't pass, approvals, that's obviously a loss for the entire community. So now we can make sure that we identify the right people for the right trials. It also helps make trial outcomes clearer. We can test people and we can see if they still have a presence of alpha-synuclein, if their alpha-synuclein presence is abating, getting less. And so we can tell if the treatments are working much more quickly. And we all know that we're looking for things to be effective as quickly as possible. We're also looking to a time where we can have early detection. We can test somebody and see if these alpha-synuclein clumps are present before they've even had a diagnosis. And we all know earlier detection can lead to better results long-term. As we look to the future and we have a roadmap forward with this new biomarker, we're looking to integrate it into even more clinical trials to make sure that we do have this diagnostic or measure for all clinical trials going forward. We're also looking to kind of change the way we think about Parkinson's right now. We just 2 months ago came out with an article in in a large medical journal that talks about biological staging. And that's something we're all familiar with because we've heard about it with things like cancer. You can know somebody with stage 1 cancer or somebody with stage 4 cancer, and the way they're treated is very different. Well, we want there to be a staging for Parkinson's so that we can approach people at their stage and give them the most aggressive treatment possible so that they have the best possible outcomes. So there would be like a 0 to 6 scale, which we could then grade you on. And this biomarker would make something like that so much clearer. We're also looking to fund research to make this test easier for people to take. We're not asking everybody to take a spinal tap, and this test is actually not clinically available right now, so you can't just go to your doctor and ask for it. But we do foresee a time when that might be possible. So we're trying to change it into something a bit more palatable, like a skin test or a blood test, something that you could easily take. It could help us understand the underlying biology, and also we could create disease subtypes. We said there are things that look like Parkinson's that aren't. Well, maybe Parkinson's could be an umbrella, and then we could have subtypes, and you could be treated according to the type of Parkinson's that you have. As we look at the future and what we've been doing, I just wanted to bring things back, like ground it a little more to what we have going on now. And there's actually a lot of excitement in the world of Parkinson's. Melanie discussed how recently there have been so many incredible approvals. There's so many more medications for Parkinson's symptoms that are available right now. And we see that really only continuing. There's actually two possible therapeutics that are with the FDA for approval now. So keep a lookout. You can, look at our website. We always give updates on FDA approvals, or sometimes these are headlines in other places as well. But maybe keep your eyes and ears open to hear about some of these approvals that might be coming down the pike. One of them, or actually two of them on the list, but one of them that's with FDA approval right now, is actually for a different sort of mechanism. Most people who have Parkinson's disease will take a drug called Sinemet or some form of levodopa-carbidopa or dopamine agonist. And it's a pill form. And very often we know people with Parkinson's, their digestion can be compromised. So for some people, taking a pill is not the most effective way to get you a slow and steady stream of medication throughout the day so that your symptoms are at level or at a baseline. So we have something called a subcutaneous pump. That's been really intriguing to people. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. But what it does is it bypasses your whole digestive tract, and it gives you an infusion under the skin of a constant stream of the medication. So, some people have what we call on and off times. This would help abate those. We're always looking for just like a better way to get the medication to where it needs to be at the right time. The second drug that you see over here is actually kind of working at the same thing. It's another formulation of levodopa-carbidopa, which is the drug that replaces or acts like dopamine in your brain. But what it is you would take it and it would act immediately like a regular pill. But in that same pill, it would have an extended release formulation. So it would work immediately, but also it would give you smaller doses of the drug throughout the day. So taking one pill, might take the place of two pills, or it might just last longer until your next dose. So those are with FDA approval right now. We also have another pill that's called a dopamine agonist, which also sort of mimics dopamine in your brain. And we have another subcutaneous pump. These are in the last stages of clinical trials. So we're hoping that they do well, and we'll see those go for FDA approval soon. I also wanted to call attention to a couple of other new therapies on the horizon. You'll see on the far side of this screen, on the right side, there is a little cartoon of the pump that I was just talking about. It goes around your waist like a little belt, and then you would have the injections of medication underneath your skin, and that part that's attached to this woman's belly. But I also wanted to talk about two other sort of novel therapies coming down the pipe. Often people with Parkinson's will have some speech or swallowing issues, or general issues with their throat. So this company called Atom has now developed this mechanism that goes on your throat. It's a technological device, just like you see in the picture, and it uses a vibration technology to sort of trick the brain or prod it in the direction of helping with swallowing, drooling, eating, speech. So it's a wearable that you could use to help abate some of those symptoms that come with Parkinson's. And then really excitingly, something that we're keeping our eye on is a company called Takeda, which is looking to develop the first ever drug for Parkinson's cognition issues and Parkinson's gait. The Michael J. Fox Foundation a few years ago took a survey of people with Parkinson's, and over 65% self-reported that they had issues with gait and balance. And that worried us because it's an immediate health and safety concern, and we definitely want our population to be safe. So, we kind of felt like this was something that we weren't sure whether or not you could take a pill for, but this company, Takeda, is very confident. They have this pill, which is working to increase the production of acetylcholine in the brain, and they believe that that will help with cognition and gait. It's shown very promising first results, so we're going to continue to keep our eye on it. So there's a lot happening behind the scene, and a lot happening at the forefront. So we have so much to look forward to, and I feel like I just talked a lot. So Melanie, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk about how we can get involved.
So much, Vega. I think it's always so informative and eye-opening to hear all that's going on in the research landscape. But while research is our primary focus, we also have other resources available to the greater Parkinson's community. And first, I just wanted to touch on, you heard Vega mention earlier the PPMI observational trial, and a shout out to get involved if that's something you might be interested in. And if you are interested in clinical trials, I wanted to flag that we have developed a tool called the Fox Trial Finder to help match potential participants with a trial that would be the right fit for them. So this tool is really useful. It's a link, and you go on the website, and it gives you prompts. You just follow the steps really easily to identify, what trial might be a fit for you. This is something that's really important in order to get research moved through that process I talked about earlier. We need participants. And even though most people with Parkinson's will say that they are interested in research, only about a quarter ever actually take that step. So just wanted to flag this tool for you. We actually have about 57 trials within 50 miles of New York City. So there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. And other ways, if you're looking for more resources from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, so maybe you were newly diagnosed with Parkinson's, maybe you care for someone who's had Parkinson's for a long time, and there's new symptoms and new issues you're running into, and you're just looking for some guidance. We have a library of resources in the form of webinars, podcasts, articles, oftentimes either led by actual people living with Parkinson's and their care partners, led by our on-staff movement disorder specialist, Dr. Rachel Dolan, who's our VP of Medical Communications. And these topics can range anywhere from resources for those who are newly diagnosed, guides. We have an exercise guide, a sleep guide, a diet guide, a lot of different places that you can look to get the information you need. And if you're not the best with computers, you're struggling to find anything on our website, you can always just reach out to either Vega or myself if you have a question you can't answer, and we'll do our best to support you with that. And then if you're looking to kind of get more active with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, with just the general Parkinson's community at large, there's a few other ways you can do that as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our Team Fox community. This is our grassroots fundraising arm, and it's really just people in the community, anyone who says, hey, I want to do my part and raise money for Parkinson's research. And that may be through starting their own event, joining an athletic event like the New York City Marathon. You'll see folks running in the Team Fox jerseys every marathon season if you go out and watch. So all of you, you're welcome to take a look at the events that some of our folks already have. Think about joining a marathon, or even just coming out to cheer with us. And it's really an incredible group that since 2006, when the Team Fox community first started, they've raised over $120 million for Parkinson's research. And it's a great way to connect with others who may be going through something similar as you. So then we also have a group focused on advocacy here at the Fox Foundation. So we have a staff team who work on advocating on state and federal levels for policies that streamline research and eliminate environmental and social risk contributors, because we know that's part of Parkinson's as well. So I wanted to take a minute to just talk about two of our current advocacy priorities. Figure you can, go ahead to the next slide there. And the first one is called the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. So this is actually really incredible. It's the first ever federal legislation devoted to ending Parkinson's disease. It's a bipartisan, no-cost legislation that will create an advisory council comprising members of federal agencies, people living with Parkinson's, care partners, researchers, so on, other experts. And this was actually passed by the House of Representatives in December. So we're really, really thrilled to have that first step. Of course, we know the government is a multi-stepped process. So the next step is to get that passed by the US Senate. And so if you're the type of person who likes to advocate, reach out to your elected officials and say, hey, this is important to me, we have ways that you can do that. We make it really easy with a template. You can send it, send it right off in an email and a letter and a phone call. And it's really important to show support. And I do know Senator Schumer is a proponent, is a fan of this particular act. So any support to our New York senators that we can have is very helpful. And then on the state level in New York, we are currently working to pass a bill to get a Parkinson's registry approved in the New York State. What that is to be used really to monitor sort of the healthcare process. It helps detect potential problems throughout that process and achieve better results for people with Parkinson's. It also creates a really vast data set that can help bolster research. One thing I want to share is that any data in this Parkinson's registry is de-identified. So it could never be connected back to you saying, oh, so-and-so has Parkinson's. It's all de-identified, but it's helpful to understand the prevalence of Parkinson's. Is there a particular area of the state where we're seeing a lot of Parkinson's cases? Why is that an environmental factor we might want to investigate? So that's a really important piece of legislation, and we're working on different states throughout the country, but New York is one of them. And actually just last week, this bill passed to the New York State Senate, and now we're working on having it pass the state assembly. So similarly, if you have a relationship with your assembly member or just like to get involved, you're able to quickly send a note helping to encourage them to pass that. Okay. Lastly, the thing we want to kind of leave you with is to remember to take care of yourself. I know that sounds silly, but really in terms of anyone living with Parkinson's or caring for a family member or a friend with Parkinson's or truly any chronic condition, it's so important to make sure you're putting self-care in your to-do list, right? So that can look like a bunch of different things, but especially for Parkinson's, we always recommend exercise is very important. We know that there have been some studies, but we also just know exercise is good for the body. And especially for Parkinson's, it helps get that dopamine kicking, whatever's left of it. So we always encourage that, but it's whatever type of exercise you are happy doing. There's no one specific formula we recommend in particular. Also, having a healthy diet is really important. So healthy, balanced diet with a lot of antioxidants. The Mediterranean diet is actually the healthiest for you. As I mentioned, we have some diet guides to kind of help with guidance there. And then just taking part in other self-care activities. Things like meditation, or getting involved in your community, taking on a hobby. We know that sometimes isolation is a concern in Parkinson's. Some of the, under the surface symptoms can include depression, apathy, anxiety. So we want to make sure people are taking care of themselves to try to combat those types of things as well. And we always tell people to build out their care team in the way that makes the most sense for you. As Vega mentioned earlier, when you get that Parkinson's diagnosis, hopefully you're seeing a neurologist, especially someone who's a movement disorder specialist, but you may also consider physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech, or a nutritionist, all these different things that could help you live your best life. So we just wanted to kind of to make a shout out for self-care. Okay, we've done a lot of talking. Hopefully we didn't take up too much time. And so definitely want to leave a few minutes. If anybody has questions now, or we have our email addresses here, you can feel free to reach out to us after the fact as well.